Hello, good morning friends. Welcome back to your favorite channel Code One Digest. Today in this tutorial I am going to teach you how can we make our web application secure using AWS Cognito Service. Yes friend, in this tutorial I'll explain you what is Cognito Service, how can we use Cognito Service for authentication and authorization in our web application and mobile application. So we can use AWS Cognito as our identity storage. We can use Cognito for all authentication requirement and authorization requirement. So I'll show you step by step how to integrate AWS Cognito Service in our web application, how to authenticate user. So stay tuned and watch this tutorial till end. If you want to learn AWS, if you want to learn Cognito Service, if you want to learn how to make your application, your web application secure, then this is a tutorial for you. Okay friends, so here is the agenda of this tutorial today. I'll explain you what is AWS Cognito Service all about. How is the authentication flow in Cognito? We'll understand that with a sequence diagram. Then I'll explain you an architecture diagram of this demo, what we are trying to achieve in this demo. Then I'll show you how to set up Cognito Service in AWS, how to create user pool, and then how to create user in the user pool. We'll create Nestjs application for our demo. Then we'll run our application. Then finally we'll test our application for the login using the user that we have created in Cognito. Okay friends? Okay friends, so let's understand what is Cognito. Amazon Cognito is a service from AWS that helps developer in adding user authentication, authorization, and management to their web and mobile applications. So we use Cognito as authentication and authorization server for our web application and mobile application. Cognito is an authentication server and authorization server for OAuth2 access token and AWS credentials. We can use Cognito for access token authentication and authorization, and also using AWS credentials. Cognito can also be used to authenticate and authorize user from built-in user directory, maybe LDAP, SAML, SAML, or Okta, or also from federated identity providers like Google and Facebook. Cognito can also integrate with social authentication providers like Google, Facebook, Twitter, and so on. We can authenticate users using their Google account or using their Facebook account or using their social accounts. Amazon Cognito comes with two main components. First is user pool and second is identity pool. User pool is a directory that provides the sign up and sign in option for your application users. User pool is a storage where you keep all your users authentication details, the username and password and so on, right? Now second is the identity pool. Identity pool enables you to grant user access to other AWS services. So if you have a requirement that after authentication, now I want to grant user access to EC2 instance or access to database, for that we will use identity pool. But in this demo, we'll create user pool, then we'll create user into that user pool, and then we'll log in into our application using that credentials. Okay friends, so let's understand how user authentication works with Cognito user pool. This is end user that we want to authenticate. So first, user sends the request to our application. This is our web application. So user will enter the username and password. Now second thing what will happen is the login request will go to Amazon Cognito user pool. Third step applies when we have integrated Cognito with any federated identity provider service like Google or Facebook. Cognito will send user an additional challenge. Once the user responds to it, then Cognito returns a token to the application. That token is a JWT token what Cognito has provided, and the token will have all the information regarding user. Application receives the token, it retrieves information out of the token, who is this user, and what all access the user have got. Now receiving that information in application will perform the action and provide the access accordingly. That means provide the data based on permission provided by the token. So what is the advantage of using Amazon Cognito user pool here? So we don't have to build identity server within our application. That means when I am building my web application, I need not to worry about authentication mechanism, right friends? So when I'm building my mobile app or I'm building a web application, so I should not be worrying how do I authenticate my users. I can use Cognito and I can integrate my application with Cognito Service, and I can call Cognito Service for authenticating the users. And based on the response, our application will provide the permissions, provide the data to the user. Cognito is a well-established, well-proven solution for authentication and authorization that you can use at the minimal cost from AWS. Okay friend, so let me explain you with the architecture diagram what are we trying to achieve in this tutorial. So this is a UI component of our application. It may be your application login form or it can be a login on your mobile app. So this is a UI component of your web application. So user enters the credentials here. That comes to our application backend component. So our application having two parts. First is UI component and second is the backend component, that is business logic. In UI component, we have a login form for user to log in by providing email address and password. So request will come to our /login endpoint here in login controller. Our login controller will pass that information, user information, to our login service. It's a business layer. And here we have a business logic to authenticate user based on email address and password by contacting the Amazon Cognito service. So this business layer class will call to Cognito. Cognito will authenticate all the details. If user is a valid user, then Cognito will send a successful response with a access token. Now that token will contain all the information regarding that user, what is the role of that user, what is the permission of that user, so that our application can provide the data to that user. Now admin user who is logging into AWS Management Console and adding user to this Amazon Cognito pool. So from this channel, we can add all our users, required user into Cognito pool, and then those user can log in from this login form and application can request Cognito for the authentication and authorization of those users. So in this demo, I'll be building this application and then we'll be authenticating user by providing the email address and password. Okay friends, so you have to log in first into your AWS Management Console. I have logged in with my credentials in AWS Management Console. You can search for Cognito Service. On left hand side, you will see two options, user pool and identity pool. So in this demo, I'll be showing you how to create user pool and how to add user in user pool. So this is our user pool dashboard. Click on create user pool button. There are 6 steps to create user pool. So on very first step, we have to select how we want to allow the sign in for our user. I'll say using email. In this demo, I am selecting email. Then password policy, how you want your password to be look like, that it should be minimum 8 characters, 1 numeric, 1 special character, 1 upper letter, 1 lower letter, right? Then do you want to enable multi-factor authentication for your user? So I will say no, but if you want, you can enable that feature. I am selecting enable self-recovery account and email only, right? Then you click next. On this page, we'll be configuring our sign-up experience. Self-registration, select enable self-registration, and for attribute, select allow Cognito to automatically send message to verify and confirm. And here attribute to verify will say send email message. We are not sending SMS, right? So we'll say send email message. Verify attribute changes, keep original attribute value active. If you want, you can add any custom attributes. So you can define your own custom attributes, and this information will flow down in token to your application to take appropriate action. Click next. And then how do you want to receive message from Cognito, whether using SES service? Otherwise you can select send email with Cognito. That Cognito will send the email, all required email to the users. The email will come now from this email ID. On next page, you are creating a user pool, and now in that this user pool can be used with one or more application. You may create one single user pool, and you can use that user pool with the multiple applications. So here we'll be creating a user pool name, Code One Digest Cognito Authentication Demo. My application is a server side. So server side application that can securely store a client secret. Then I have to give app name, so I'm giving demo app and do not generate client secret. Advanced app client setting. So how we want user to get authenticated in this app? I'll say by allowing user password authentication. Select this option. So you will have three options selected: allow refresh token auth, allow user SRP auth, that is secure remote password, and third is allow user password auth, username and password authentication. So we will be using username and password authentication. These are some default configuration, that what is the session duration for your authentication, then what is the token expiration time, and so on, right? So let it be as is, but if you can customize it as per your requirement. And for advanced security configuration, I am selecting enable token revocation, attribute read write, so let it be default. I am keeping as is, and I'm just saying next. So here we can review what all configuration we have selected in those 6 steps. At the bottom, I'll just create this user pool. So you see this user pool is now created, and this is a user pool ID. Let's go inside and see the details here. So this is the user pool name, and this is the user pool ID. So this user pool ID we will use in our application. And if you come down here, right now we don't have any user. Inside app integration, you can see your app that you have created. So this is the app I have created, and this is a client ID. So this client ID we will use along with our user pool ID to authenticate our user. Friends, before we proceed in this video, I request you to subscribe this channel to grow Code One Digest family. Friends, I am creating a lot of quality videos on programming, coding concepts, design pattern and design principles, cloud and container technologies, but I'm not getting subscribers. I request you to like, share and subscribe this channel so that I can grow our Code One Digest family. Thank you. Okay friends, so now let's add some user in this user pool. You can click on user tab, click on create user. Here you can say send an email invitation, right? And provide the user email address. So let's say I'm giving Code One Digest and say generate password. So it will generate password and send it to this email address. I'll say mark this email address as verified. Let me add this user. Now AWS will send an email with temporary password. Let me see that. Yeah, so here is my credentials. Your username is this and the temporary password is this. So we will use this username and password to log in into our application using this Cognito user pool. Okay friends, so now it's time for us to create our web application. So to create web application, I am using Nestjs framework. You can use Node.js or you can use Java. You can use any programming language that you are comfortable with. The important takeaway here in this exercise is how to integrate our application with Cognito. I'll show you that. So let me create my Nestjs application. You can follow with me if you want to create Nestjs application. So here I'll say Nest new, and this is my application name. I'm giving code one digest Cognito auth demo. I'll say package manager npm. Yeah, so it is creating a project for me. So it is always good to create Nestjs application, Nestjs project using nest command, so that it creates a skeleton for you. It creates all required files for you automatically. Right, so it is done. You can see this project structure is created, and I'll now open this in Visual Studio Code. Let me open that. Let me load this project in Visual Studio Code. Yeah friends, so I have opened that project in Visual Studio Code. So this is the project structure. I have all the required files. So very first thing that we'll do here is inside the packet.json, we'll add all the required dependencies, all required AWS Cognito dependencies, so that we have those libraries available. Let me add that. Okay friends, so I have added these three libraries: AWS SDK, Client Cognito Identity, Identity Provider, and Cognito Identity. Clear, and I'll run npm install. So it will download all required libraries in our node module directory. Okay friends, yes, so it is done. The very first thing that we'll do is we'll write our login endpoint in our controller class. So let me show you that. Okay friend, so here is my login controller. If you see here, I have imported all these objects because I'm going to use it. Now I have defined a login user function here with /login, and at controller level I'll be having auth, so the URL will become /auth/login, and it is accepting input as a user login DTO. So I'll create this user login DTO with email and password field. Okay friends, so I have added this user login DTO. It is a simple class with two fields, email and password, and that we are referring it here, right? Now what we'll do is I'll write our business logic and this login function in our app service.class. That means this class. Okay friends, so here is the business logic. Let me explain you line by line what I am doing in the service layer. Same thing you can do in your programming language. Importing again user login DTO, and then I'm importing authentication details, Cognito user pool from Amazon Cognito Identity JS. Okay, so this is my class, and the very first thing what I'm doing is I'm creating an object of Cognito user pool, right? And then in constructor I'm initializing this Cognito user pool with user pool ID and client ID. If you remember, user pool ID, we have it in our AWS management console, and client ID of our application client ID. Let me go back and read that. So this is my user pool ID. Let me read this user pool ID. This is my user pool ID. Copy that user pool ID, paste it here, and we need a client ID of our application. Go to app integration, come down. This is my client ID. So this is what we want. Set it here. So my Cognito user pool will be having this information handy, the user pool ID and client ID in the constructor. Once this is done, then let's come to a login user function. This is the function we are calling from controller, and it is accepting an object of user login DTO, which is having email address and password. Once it comes here, I'm creating an object of authentication details, right? So in the authentication details takes username and password that is coming from user, and then I'm creating a Cognito user by providing username and pool. So this pool is nothing but the pool object, user pool ID plus client ID. So now in Cognito user, in this user I am having username, user pool ID, and application client ID. Three things I have in this user. On this user I'm calling the function authenticate user. This authenticate user is coming from those libraries that we have installed, that we have imported, by passing the authentication details. So authentication detail having email address and password. So on user is having user ID, that is email address, user pool ID and application client ID. I'm calling authenticate user, and inside that function I'm passing my username and password again. So this will authenticate user. Now on success, this code will execute. So you can write your own piece of code, what you want to do on success. On failure, I'm logging error and then returning a failure response. Now one thing is very interesting here to understand is new password required. What happens in Cognito is, as you create user, so that user is not in confirm state yet. If you see here, this particular user right now, it is not yet confirmed. So we have to confirm that user using this code. So this is the code where we are confirming that user is valid, and we are changing the confirmation status from force change password to confirmation. So once authentication is successful, then we are coming here by providing the user attribute and required attributes and all of that. We are calling user.complete new password challenge, okay, by providing the password and required attribute and so on, right? So by calling that, our user will get confirmed. Unless until user get confirmed, your authentication may not work. So you have to do this. So first you have to call authenticate user, and second you have to call complete new password challenge. As you complete new password challenge, then user status will change from force change password to confirm. Okay, so this is a business logic. You're using this library authentication details, Cognito user pool. We are authenticating the user using these three classes provided by library. Okay friends, so now this application is ready. Now what I'll do is, let me run this application. Okay friends, so now let us build and run our application. So I'm in my project directory. I'll say npm run build to build my application. Okay, so build is successful. Now I'll run my application, npm run start. So it will now start my application. So application is now started. Now we are ready to test our user authentication. Okay, in this architecture, this is our backend server, Nestjs server, which we have started. Now instead of having a form, I'm using a postman. Postman will be calling the endpoint, this endpoint, login controller endpoint, by passing the email and password in a JSON format, and we'll just validate what is the response coming from Cognito. Okay friends. Okay, let me show you my postman now. This is my postman where I have created a endpoint URL that is of type post and having localhost 3000 auth login, right? And it will take this JSON input, email ID and password. So now we'll put our email ID, that is code1digest@gmail.com. Yeah, so this is the email address, code1digest@gmail.com, and the password we have received here, right? So this is the password. So let me take this password, put this in postman. Let me save this. Yeah, so now we are ready to hit and see what happens. Okay, right friends, so do you see we got 200 response and it says success, user login successful. Let us see a log here. So there is no error. That means we are able to authenticate our user using Cognito, right friends? So the request is coming from our UI form. It is passing the email address and password to our login controller, and then login controller is calling the login service that we have seen here in the code, and finally login service is calling the Cognito service user.authenticate user by passing the email address, password, user pool and application client ID, and Cognito is sending back the response, success response to the application. Okay friends, so now let me quickly summarize what we have learned in this tutorial. We understood what is Cognito service, how authentication flow works in Cognito. We understood the architecture diagram for this demo. We learned how to set up Cognito service by creating user pool, adding user into user pool, how to set up Nestjs application, and then finally running and testing the authentication flow. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you're new to the channel, so do subscribe to my channel to grow Code One Digest family. Friends, if you like this video, so give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel for the more interesting videos. Click on the bell icon for the latest video notifications, and do not forget to share this video with all your friends and colleagues. This is very useful information for students, beginners and software engineers. I am putting a lot of efforts in creating these contents, so please help me growing the Code One Digest family. Please subscribe to Code One Digest channel for the latest programming and technology related videos. Thank you.